about now. So people now see criticizing these bad ideas that have nothing to do with gay marriage anymore, but really just sort of a radical ideology about biology and gender. They see that as an attack, or at least they're trying to portray that as an attack on the gay community, which is sort of the sacrosanct community that you're not allowed to criticize. So it's a kind of a bait and switch what they're doing. It's made it really difficult to make progress on this issue.
Now, the Biden administration is continuing to strip away protections for biological sex, recently making changes to Title IX that would prohibit any form of discrimination based on gender identity, which could include barring a male student who identified as female from a girls' changing room. The administration this week also wrote out a set of new guidelines stating that employers must honor the preferred pronouns and bathroom choices of employees identifying as transgender. Failing to do so now leaves employers liable for harassment. Now, Colin, as someone who has, you described yourself as center-left and somewhat of a disaffected liberal, do you think the base of liberal and Democratic voters support this position of biological sex?
Absolutely. I mean, so many people in my sphere are afraid to speak out about this thing, but they send me messages. I hear from them. They understand that biology is real. The reason we have sex-segregated spaces, changing rooms, intimate spaces, sports, prisons, etc., is because of the sex differences we have. We're a sexually dimorphic species, as we call it. We have different types of behaviors. Women are more susceptible to violence from men and sexual aggression, those types of things. So this is why we have these different spaces in the first place. Everyone sort of realizes that, like at a fundamental level. To deny this fundamental aspect of our species, of not just our species, but mammals generally, about sex, is really to deny one of the most fundamental aspects of our biological reality. And most people can see that. A lot of people don't even know what the more far-left activists are saying about the biology of sex. Again, they've been sort of duped into just thinking this is still this progression from the gay rights movement, and that, oh, it's just a bunch of evil conservatives that just don't like people who are dressing funny or something in their minds. So really, but the more this gets out to the general public, when they see these stark things like Leah Thomas, biological males competing in female sports, people get it immediately. And so we just need more people to sort of start waking up to this, because we have a silent majority that is on our side. They're just sort of silent right now, or they're asleep, and they need to be woken up to this issue.
Given that, how can liberal and Democratic voters especially take back the reins, if you will, and demand that their elected leaders represent their views when it comes to policy?
It comes down to speaking up, really, speaking about these basic truths and not being afraid to speak them, because I think a lot of this ideology has been pushed through so much precisely because people are afraid, because people come after you if you're making these statements. If you really say the emperor has no clothes, sex is real, that we have these sex segregated spaces for a good reason, the sex isn't a social construct, this is a fundamental reality that evolved hundreds of millions of years ago, and it's no different today, then this is how we make progress. And start local too. Start with your local school boards and sort of move outwards. We need to have our voices heard out there, because we do have the facts on our side, quite in a stark way. There's not really ambiguity here, which there are a lot of policy issues. Sex is one of those things where it's pretty cut and dry. There was only two sexes, and everyone really knows that at a fundamental level.
Expanding on that, given that you are the founding editor of Reality's Last Stand, how do we find common ground and get back to this reality, putting truth over politics and ideology?
It comes down to conversations. There's been this policy of no debate on the left for so long about some of these issues, and I think that's because they know that if there is a debate, they'll be shown to be completely bankrupt in these ideas that they're pushing. We're kind of getting to a point now where more people are speaking up, and they can no longer say no debate because we have other platforms we can go on to now. We've created some of our own platforms, and so it's just going to take trying to speak truth, trying to have these conversations with those who are close to you and your families, the policymakers, and not conversations where you're being super aggressive, but just trying to reason with people who are in your immediate sphere, and then expanding circles outward from there. But communication is going to be key in order to make sure that we're all grounded in the same reality, basically. Because right now we're watching two separate screens, two different movies. We need to make sure we're on the same screen, or at least we're talking about the same movie.
Well, Colin Wright, evolutionary biologist and founding editor of Reality's Last Stand, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Robert F. Kennedy Jr. proposed an agreement to President Biden in which whoever scores lower in a poll against former President Trump will drop out of the 2024 race. NTD's Jason Blair reports.
Independent presidential candidate Robert F. Kennedy Jr. made the proposal on Wednesday during a campaign event in New York.
This is a pledge that I offer to take if President Biden also takes it.
Kennedy's no spoiler pledge would consist of an agreement between President Joe Biden and himself to take an election poll in October, one with Biden against former President Trump and another with himself against Trump.
Both parties agree to co-fund in mid-October a 50-state poll with 30,000 or more likely voters. So this is essentially effectively zero margin of error.
Kennedy said that whoever loses the poll will agree to drop out of the presidential race. Kennedy also said while he doesn't think former President Trump is a spoiler, he'd be happy to make the same pledge with him.
Because I can do better against President Biden than President Trump can.
The Biden campaign has not responded to Kennedy's proposal. At the event, Kennedy also showed poll results from 50 states of Biden losing to Trump, Kennedy beating Biden by a wide margin, and Kennedy beating Trump. The results cite a poll done in April by Johns Ogby Strategies. Kennedy said it's the largest poll done so far for the 2024 election, polling 26,000 likely voters from all 50 states. According to Kennedy, the margin of error is only 0.6%. Jason Blair, NTD News.
Georgia is now the latest state to enact legislation against illegal immigration. Governor Brian Kemp signed a new immigration enforcement law aimed at bolstering public safety. The governor signed around 10 new measures into law yesterday. He says they serve to counteract lawlessness, boost recruitment of police officers, and make communities safer. One of the bills requires law enforcement to check the immigration status of some individuals. That includes people who are arrested or detained and those who might have committed a crime. If the person is in the country illegally, police must then notify federal authorities. This comes as conservative states across the country have implemented laws targeting illegal immigration, including Florida, Louisiana, and Oklahoma. Coming up in golf, the U.S. Open is next.
Our lives. And yet faith in the Lord, that challenge can lead us to true peace in this insane world. We can't do it without you. We're competing with big Hollywood movies, so we're relying on your voice to spread the word. Thank you again for supporting this important movie.
Law to no longer recognize officers from agencies like the FBI, the DEA, ATF, and others as having automatically been granted full police powers upon entering the state. They instead would need permission from state and local authorities to carry out their operations there. It's a bold move that's already got some folks riled up. But is it really that outrageous? After all, the Constitution never actually grants federal government any general law enforcement powers within state boundaries. Isn't local law enforcement supposed to primarily be a state's rights issue? You'd think federal agencies involving themselves in local policing would need a rock-solid constitutional justification for doing so, but does one actually exist? We have to consider the dangers of expanding federal political and police presence, as well as how local control could easily be eroded by doing this. And once you go down that road of centralized, nationalized law enforcement, you're sort of opening a Pandora's box for serious government overreach and even setting the stage for multinational laws and multinational enforcement on the ground. It's a safe bet that the founders would not have favored an all-powerful national police force. On the other hand, we would probably want cooperation between the feds and locals to catch criminals and protect society in general. Could restricting that partnership make communities less safe? Or maybe it would reinforce a conscious and courteous relationship and benefit everyday people. Who knows? But what is for sure is that law enforcement authority is a powerful thing that goes to the core of how much control communities have over their own affairs. Maybe Kentucky's legislature is simply trying to reset the balance towards some sort of local autonomy before that concept's completely a thing of the past. So, over a mint julep, ponder this. Is Kentucky's effort to cut out rogue Fed policing a reasonable reassertion of their own sovereignty, or does it attempt to just address a non-existent problem? Thanks for watching.